The galaxy did not hear humanity scream. It heard the silence that came afterward. In a universe where every major civilization monitored hyperspace with endless webs of quantum sensors, where even the smallest mining accident generated thousands of automated distress signals, the sudden disappearance of the human colony on Epsilon Carini IV should have unleashed chaos across known space. Instead, there was nothing. No panicked transmissions. No emergency evacuation requests. No desperate military broadcasts. Only an impossible absence that spread through communication networks like a shadow swallowing light. Astronomers stared at their displays as a thriving blue-green world simply vanished behind expanding clouds of incandescent debris. Orbiting stations that had circled the planet for decades were reduced to glowing fragments tumbling silently through vacuum. Merchant vessels arriving hours later found no survivors waiting in escape pods. No rescue beacons blinked through the darkness. Only drifting wreckage, frozen forever in the final seconds of ordinary lives interrupted by unimaginable violence. Children's toys floated beside shattered solar panels. Pieces of civilian transport spun endlessly between broken satellites. Entire neighborhoods had become glittering dust illuminated by the distant light of their dying sun. Every image transmitted back to civilized space carried the same haunting message without speaking a single word. Something terrible had happened here. Something deliberate. Then, from somewhere deep within the expanding graveyard, a damaged emergency relay awakened. Its antenna, twisted beyond recognition, rotated with painful slowness as failing backup power pushed one final signal across the stars. Static consumed most of the transmission. Distorted voices crackled in and out of existence. Alarms screamed beneath overwhelming interference. Then came a frightened whisper from an unidentified operator, barely audible between bursts of electromagnetic noise. They came without warning. The recording ended with a deafening surge of white static before disappearing forever. That single sentence crossed thousands of light-years in less than an hour. It reached military headquarters, civilian networks, merchant guilds, research stations, and eventually every seat within the Galactic Council. Analysts replayed the recording millions of times, searching for hidden frequencies, weapon signatures, or clues buried beneath the interference. They found nothing. Whoever had destroyed Epsilon Carini IV had erased nearly every trace of their attack with terrifying precision. Across alien capitals, reactions came swiftly. Emergency meetings were called. Intelligence agencies accused rival empires. Politicians demanded investigations while ambassadors prepared carefully rehearsed condemnations. Some believed humanity would respond with emotional outrage. Others predicted endless negotiations, sanctions, or pleas for international intervention. Veteran admirals quietly repositioned defensive fleets, expecting retaliation that might spread into regional conflict. Financial markets trembled. Trade routes slowed. News channels filled every screen with endless debates about responsibility, diplomacy, and the fragile balance of galactic peace. Yet amid all the speculation, one detail unsettled everyone who had spent centuries studying humans. Earth said nothing. No declaration of war echoed through the stars. No speeches condemned the atrocity. No mourning ceremonies were broadcast to the galaxy. Human diplomats simply disappeared from public view. Their embassies closed without explanation. Commercial traffic entering human territory abruptly ceased. Long-range communications from every human colony dropped to absolute zero. One by one, navigation beacons along the borders of human space went dark until an entire region of the Orion Arm became an unnerving void on every galactic map. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of purpose. For the first time in recorded history, experienced generals felt something colder than panic. They felt uncertainty. Because every predator in the galaxy understood one ancient truth. The loudest warning was never the scream before the strike. It was the silence before the hunter moved. Deep beneath the ancient granite foundations of Earth's Himalayas, where sunlight had never reached and no civilian map acknowledged its existence, a pair of colossal titanium doors slowly separated for the first time in 312 years. Their movement echoed through miles of reinforced corridors like the awakening heartbeat of a sleeping giant. Dust that had rested undisturbed for centuries drifted into the sterile air as hidden reactors surged to full power, illuminating an underground chamber so vast it could have swallowed entire cities. This was the command vault, the final sanctuary of humanity's oldest military secret. Here, every war ever fought, every lesson learned, and every contingency ever imagined had been preserved by generations who believed that peace could only survive if someone remained prepared for its failure. Standing alone at the center of the immense chamber was Admiral Elias Ward. His weathered face reflected countless years of service, but today the weight on his shoulders felt heavier than any uniform could carry. Before him, millions of holographic stars ignited one after another, forming a living map of human civilization that stretched across the known galaxy. Every colony pulsed with soft blue light. Every defense station glowed quietly in silence. Except one. Epsilon Carini 4 remained a cold black void, a wound carved directly into humanity's heart. Ward didn't lower his head. He simply stared at the darkness where millions of lives had existed only hours before. Families. Farmers. Scientists. Children who had believed they were building humanity's future beneath an alien sky. They had never been soldiers. They had never expected to become symbols. Yet their absence now echoed louder than any declaration of war ever could. Taking a slow breath, Ward placed his hand against an ancient biometric console engraved with a single phrase passed down through centuries of commanders, "Peace through preparedness." The console recognized his authorization instantly. Across the chamber, dormant systems awakened in perfect sequence. Lights brightened. Massive holographic displays expanded across the walls. Artificial intelligences that had slept for generations quietly came online, their calm voices confirming operational readiness. Continuity Protocol Omega acknowledged. Global Strategic Network restored. Authorization accepted. The words carried no emotion, yet somehow they sounded like history itself had begun to move. Thousands of kilometers away, hidden beneath the red deserts of Mars, gigantic blast doors split open across seemingly empty plains. Beneath them rested shipyards so enormous that entire mountain ranges had concealed their existence from orbit. Fusion furnaces roared to life, flooding endless construction docks with blinding white light. Half-finished battleships suspended in magnetic cradles awakened as robotic assembly swarms descended upon them in disciplined waves. On Titan, beneath frozen oceans of methane, enormous factories emerged from beneath kilometers of ice, their reactor cores glowing like artificial suns beneath the surface. Deep inside hollowed asteroids drifting through forgotten sectors, automated foundries accelerated production lines that had never truly stopped. Every hidden installation received the same encrypted transmission. No speeches. No explanations. Just two words recognized by every defense network ever built. Iron Dawn. Across hundreds of worlds, humanity responded with breathtaking precision. Engineers abandoned celebrations and returned silently to their stations. Farmers watched distant military convoys pass without asking questions. Cargo pilots diverted supplies toward classified coordinates already waiting inside their navigation systems. Civilian orbital elevators transformed overnight into military logistics hubs. Entire industries shifted from commerce to survival with astonishing speed, as though the blueprint for this moment had existed all along. There was no panic. No chaos. Only quiet determination flowing through billions of ordinary people who understood exactly what had been taken from them, and exactly what might come next. The galaxy had spent generations believing humans were explorers, diplomats, traders, and dreamers. They saw peaceful colonies, humanitarian fleets, and scientific expeditions reaching farther into the stars than any civilization before them. What they never saw were the centuries of discipline hidden beneath that peaceful exterior. Every treaty had been signed while contingency plans expanded beneath the surface. Every generation had inherited not only hope for peace, but responsibility to defend it if peace was shattered. Now, as colossal reactors illuminated forgotten shipyards across human space, one truth became impossible to ignore. Humanity had not begun preparing for war after the colony was destroyed. Humanity had simply stopped pretending it never expected this day to come. Deep beneath the ancient granite foundations of Earth's Himalayas, where sunlight had never reached and no civilian map acknowledged its existence, a pair of colossal titanium doors slowly separated for the first time in 312 years. Their movement echoed through miles of reinforced corridors like the awakening heartbeat of a sleeping giant. Dust that had rested undisturbed for centuries drifted into the sterile air as hidden reactors surged to full power, illuminating an underground chamber so vast it could have swallowed entire cities. This was the command vault, the final sanctuary of humanity's oldest military secret. Here, every war ever fought, every lesson learned, and every contingency ever imagined had been preserved by generations who believed that peace could only survive if someone remained prepared for its failure. Standing alone at the center of the immense chamber was Admiral Elias Ward. His weathered face reflected countless years of service, but today the weight on his shoulders felt heavier than any uniform could carry. Before him, millions of holographic stars ignited one after another, forming a living map of human civilization that stretched across the known galaxy. Every colony pulsed with soft blue light. Every defense station glowed quietly in silence. Except one. Epsilon Carini IV remained a cold black void, a wound carved directly into humanity's heart. Ward didn't lower his head. He simply stared at the darkness where millions of lives had existed only hours before. Families. Farmers. Scientists. Children who had believed they were building humanity's future beneath an alien sky. They had never been soldiers. They had never expected to become symbols. Yet their absence now echoed louder than any declaration of war ever could. Taking a slow breath, Ward placed his hand against an ancient biometric console engraved with a single phrase passed down through centuries of commanders, "Peace through preparedness." The console recognized his authorization instantly. Across the chamber, dormant systems awakened in perfect sequence. Lights brightened. Massive holographic displays expanded across the walls. Artificial intelligences that had slept for generations quietly came online, their calm voices confirming operational readiness. Continuity Protocol Omega acknowledged. Global Strategic Network restored. Authorization accepted. The words carried no emotion, yet somehow they sounded like history itself had begun to move. Thousands of kilometers away, hidden beneath the red deserts of Mars, gigantic blast doors split open across seemingly empty plains. Beneath them rested shipyards so enormous that entire mountain ranges had concealed their existence from orbit. Fusion furnaces roared to life, flooding endless construction docks with blinding white light. Half-finished battleships suspended in magnetic cradles awakened as robotic assembly swarms descended upon them in disciplined waves. On Titan, beneath frozen oceans of methane, enormous factories emerged from beneath kilometers of ice, their reactor cores glowing like artificial suns beneath the surface. Deep inside hollowed asteroids drifting through forgotten sectors, automated foundries accelerated production lines that had never truly stopped. Every hidden installation received the same encrypted transmission. No speeches. No explanations. Just two words recognized by every defense network ever built. Iron Dawn. Across hundreds of worlds, humanity responded with breathtaking precision. Engineers abandoned celebrations and returned silently to their stations. Farmers watched distant military convoys pass without asking questions. Cargo pilots diverted supplies toward classified coordinates already waiting inside their navigation systems. Civilian orbital elevators transformed overnight into military logistics hubs. Entire industries shifted from commerce to survival with astonishing speed, as though the blueprint for this moment had existed all along. There was no panic. No chaos. Only quiet determination flowing through billions of ordinary people who understood exactly what had been taken from them, and exactly what might come next. The galaxy had spent generations believing humans were explorers, diplomats, traders, and dreamers. They saw peaceful colonies, humanitarian fleets, and scientific expeditions reaching farther into the stars than any civilization before them. What they never saw were the centuries of discipline hidden beneath that peaceful exterior. Every treaty had been signed while contingency plans expanded beneath the surface. Every generation had inherited not only hope for peace, but responsibility to defend it if peace was shattered. Now, as colossal reactors illuminated forgotten shipyards across human space, one truth became impossible to ignore. Humanity had not begun preparing for war after the colony was destroyed. Humanity had simply stopped pretending it never expected this day to come. The Dominion celebrated as though history itself had been rewritten in their favor. Across their glittering capital world, towering spires of polished obsidian reflected endless fireworks bursting against a crimson sky while triumphant banners unfurled from government citadels that had stood for millennia. Military orchestras filled vast ceremonial plazas with thunderous victory hymns as billions watched the Supreme Chancellor address the Empire from a balcony overlooking oceans of cheering citizens. His voice rolled across every broadcast frequency with absolute confidence. Humanity, he declared, had been taught its place. The destruction of a single colony was not merely a military victory, it was a warning to every young civilization that dared challenge Dominion supremacy. The audience erupted into celebration, convinced another empire had been broken before it had truly begun. To them, humans had always seemed predictable, emotional, compassionate, eager to negotiate. They expected outrage. They expected desperate diplomacy. Perhaps even surrender. But beneath the applause, far from the cameras and carefully crafted speeches, experienced commanders exchanged uneasy glances they could not explain. The first signs were almost too subtle to notice. A deep space reconnaissance flotilla assigned to monitor the borders of human territory failed to report at its scheduled interval. Communication blackouts were not uncommon in unstable hyperspace currents, so commanders initially dismissed the silence as a technical malfunction. Hours later, a second patrol disappeared without activating emergency protocols. Then a third. Search vessels dispatched to investigate found only empty stretches of space where advanced sensor arrays insisted enormous gravitational disturbances had existed moments earlier. There were no wrecks. No energy residue. No weapon signatures. It was as if entire fleets had simply been erased from existence between one heartbeat and the next. Inside Dominion Strategic Command, confidence slowly began giving way to confusion. Massive holographic displays filled the central operations chamber, tracking billions of objects moving across known space. Technicians worked tirelessly, recalibrating quantum telescopes and deep-range tachyon scanners that had never failed before. Yet every update produced even stranger results. Unidentified energy spikes flickered briefly along the edge of explored territory before disappearing again. Hyperlane traffic patterns shifted in impossible ways. Entire sectors became obscured by interference no known technology could generate. Senior analysts argued over faulty equipment while artificial intelligence systems repeatedly flagged impossible conclusions before automatically deleting them as computational errors. The numbers simply refused to make sense. Then the observatories began to scream. On distant listening stations orbiting dead stars, automated alarms erupted simultaneously as long-range sensors detected synchronized reactor ignitions far beyond normal scanning distance. The energy output surpassed anything ever recorded in galactic history. Operators stared at cascading streams of data pouring across their displays, convinced they were witnessing catastrophic instrument failure. Yet every independent observatory reported the same impossible phenomenon. Thousands, then tens of thousands, then countless signatures appeared beyond the darkness, each one burning brighter than a battle fleet entering hyperspace. Computers struggled to assign numerical values before exceeding every known processing limit. The displays froze. Restarted. Froze again. Finally, one exhausted technician whispered the calculation no one else dared repeat. This isn't a fleet. Silence swallowed the command center. It's an armada. News spread through military channels faster than official reports could contain it. Admirals who had fought wars for centuries abandoned their certainty. Veteran officers recalled forgotten legends about civilizations that concealed their true strength beneath diplomacy until forced to reveal it. Political leaders demanded reassurance they no longer believed themselves. Civilian populations sensed the shift immediately. Financial markets collapsed. Freight convoys altered course. Refugee requests flooded neutral systems before any government admitted there was danger. And still, humanity remained silent. No declarations. No threats. No demands. Only an ever-growing ocean of impossible energy signatures advancing through the darkness with relentless precision. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Dominion understood a terrifying possibility. Perhaps they had not attacked a peaceful civilization. Perhaps they had awakened the one civilization that had spent centuries preparing for the exact mistake the galaxy had just made. No one expected humanity's first response to be a weapon. It was a file. Without warning, every government archive, military command center, scientific observatory, and diplomatic terminal across known space received the same encrypted transmission. It bypassed firewalls that had protected empires for thousands of years. Quantum encryption dissolved before algorithms no civilization recognized. There was no malicious code. No virus. No demand for surrender. Only a single data package stamped with an unmistakable seal, the emblem of the United Human Systems. For several long moments, no one dared open it. Entire governments hesitated, uncertain whether they were witnessing the beginning of a cyber attack or the final warning before war. Then, one by one, screens illuminated across the galaxy. The recording began with ordinary life. Children chased each other through parks beneath the twin suns of Epsilon Carini 4. Farmers guided autonomous harvesters across endless golden plains while orbital elevators stretched into the heavens like shining pillars. Scientists celebrated breakthroughs inside crystal-domed laboratories. Families gathered for evening meals as cargo shuttles painted glowing trails across the twilight sky. There were no soldiers marching through the streets. No hidden missile silos. No planetary shield arrays bristling with weapons. Every independent inspection report appeared beside the footage, confirming the same conclusion. The colony had fully complied with every Galactic Council treaty governing civilian settlements. Military assets had been intentionally prohibited. Defensive fleets had remained outside the system to preserve fragile diplomatic agreements that humanity had honored without exception for nearly 2 centuries. Then the footage changed. Dominion warships emerged from hyperspace without issuing a single warning. Within seconds, orbital defense satellites, designed only for navigation and weather control, were vaporized. Civilian communication networks flooded with evacuation requests that never reached neighboring systems. Hospitals overloaded with casualties before they themselves disappeared beneath orbital bombardment. Emergency shelters filled with terrified families who believed international law would protect them. The recording showed surrender beacons activating across every major city, broadcasting universally recognized signals requesting mercy. Every beacon was acknowledged by Dominion vessels. Then, the bombardment intensified. Entire continents vanished beneath expanding oceans of white fire. The silence inside council chambers became unbearable. The archive continued. Recovered sensor logs, independently verified by dozens of neutral monitoring stations, proved the attack had not been an accident. Dominion commanders had identified civilian shelters. They had tracked evacuation routes. They had calculated precisely how to maximize casualties while minimizing infrastructure damage for future occupation. Timestamp after timestamp painted a picture so horrifying that even governments traditionally loyal to the Dominion found themselves unable to look away. This had never been a battle. It had been an execution. Just as the weight of that revelation settled over the galaxy, the final section of the archive opened. A classified document appeared. Its security clearance predated nearly every modern civilization. The title alone sent shockwaves through every military command. Project Aegis, Strategic Reserve Fleet Status. One page followed another. Construction records. Maintenance schedules. Deployment maps. Photographs captured over centuries inside facilities no alien sensor had ever discovered. Entire moons hollowed into naval dockyards. Planetary cores transformed into automated manufacturing complexes. Asteroid belts concealed behind gravitational distortion fields. Vast shipyards hidden inside folded dimensions that existed just beyond normal space. Then came the final number. Operational fleet strength, 500,000 capital-class warships. Not prototypes. Not emergency construction. Operational. Maintained. Combat ready. Waiting. A stunned disbelief swept across the galaxy. For generations, every intelligence agency had estimated humanity possessed fewer than 5,000 frontline vessels. Every strategic model, every diplomatic calculation, every military doctrine had been built upon that assumption. Entire empires had measured human strength by what humanity chose to display. They had never imagined the truth. Humanity had never trusted peace enough to stop preparing for war. The final screen faded to black. Only one sentence remained. Asterisk, we honored every treaty. Asterisk. A second line appeared beneath it. Asterisk, you destroyed those who believed those treaties would protect them. Asterisk. Then, after several agonizing seconds, the last message materialized. Asterisk, restraint ended with Epsilon Carini 4. Asterisk. Across the galaxy, no one spoke. Because everyone understood the same terrifying truth at exactly the same moment. Humanity had not just declared war. Humanity had revealed that it had been ready for this war all along. The first sign of humanity's advance was not an explosion. It was the sudden disappearance of the stars. Across the frontier of Dominion space, observatories watched in stunned silence as thousands of distant suns slowly vanished behind an approaching wall of metallic silhouettes. Space itself seemed to darken as hyperspace ruptured along a front stretching across entire sectors. Then, with a synchronized flash brighter than newborn stars, they arrived. 500,000 human warships emerged in perfect formation, their quantum drives releasing waves of blue-white energy that rolled through the vacuum like silent thunder. The fleet was beyond comprehension. City-sized dreadnoughts drifted beside sleek destroyers no larger than a single city block. Titan-class carriers deployed clouds of autonomous drones that shimmered like silver constellations. Fortress ships unfolded kilometer-wide shield arrays that glowed with an ethereal brilliance, while colossal siege platforms carried weapons powerful enough to fracture planets, yet every barrel remained pointed away from civilian worlds. The armada moved not like a collection of ships, but like a single living organism, every vessel responding instantly to the others with breathtaking precision. Inside the flagship Resolute Dawn, Admiral Elias Ward stood before the panoramic command window, watching the Dominion frontier spread across the stars. Around him, hundreds of officers worked in complete silence, their movements calm, disciplined, almost ritualistic. No one celebrated. No one cheered. Every face reflected the same quiet determination born from centuries of preparation and the memory of millions who would never return home. Ward's eyes lingered on a holographic image of Epsilon Carini 4, now reduced to drifting debris. He remembered the families who had trusted humanity's promise that peace would protect them. He remembered the final transmission, asterisk, they came without warning. Asterisk, closing his eyes for only a heartbeat, he spoke the words every fleet commander had been waiting to hear. Execute justice protocol. Not vengeance. Justice. The order rippled through 500,000 warships at the speed of light. Within seconds, Dominion military infrastructure across dozens of systems went dark. Human cyber warfare divisions infiltrated enemy command networks, disabling targeting arrays before a single missile could launch. Orbital defense platforms lost power without suffering permanent damage. Communications satellites were isolated rather than destroyed, preventing commanders from coordinating attacks while preserving emergency civilian broadcasts. Precision strike teams emerged from stealth transports, capturing strategic shipyards with almost surgical efficiency. Entire battle groups surrendered without firing a shot, stunned by an opponent that seemed capable of predicting every tactical decision before it was made. The Dominion's proud Grand Fleet finally assembled near the fortress world of Karen Prime, fielding nearly 80,000 warships in a desperate attempt to halt humanity's advance. It was the largest military formation the Empire had ever deployed. For 12,000 years, no enemy had survived confronting it. Then humanity arrived. The battle lasted less than 40 minutes. Human warships moved with impossible coordination, weaving through enemy formations as if rehearsing a dance centuries in the making. Artificial intelligence linked every captain, every fighter pilot, every drone into a single battlefield consciousness. Railgun volleys intercepted missiles before launch. Directed energy lances sliced weapon arrays from enemy hulls with astonishing precision. Electromagnetic pulses disabled reactors without triggering catastrophic explosions. Ship after ship lost propulsion, shields, and weapons, yet remained structurally intact, their crews alive. Whenever enemy escape pods appeared, human rescue vessels reached them before Dominion search teams could. Medics treated wounded prisoners alongside injured human sailors without hesitation. Watching from the command bridge, Dominion commanders realized something more terrifying than overwhelming strength. Humanity was choosing not to annihilate them. They possessed weapons capable of reducing entire fleets to expanding clouds of plasma, yet they deliberately fought with restraint. Their objective was not extermination. It was accountability. As Karen Prime's defenses finally collapsed, the Supreme Chancellor issued the order no Dominion ruler had ever imagined giving. Surrender, immediately. Within 72 hours, an empire that had ruled through fear for 12 millennia laid down its arms. When the final ceasefire signal echoed across the stars, the human fleet held complete military supremacy. Yet not a single civilian city had been bombarded. Not one hospital had been targeted. Not one child had suffered the fate of Epsilon Carini IV. In that moment, the galaxy witnessed the true measure of humanity's power. It was never the 500,000 warships. It was the discipline to possess unstoppable force, and still choose mercy. The war ended not with roaring celebrations, but with silence. Days after the Dominion signed its unconditional surrender, the greatest fleet ever assembled changed course without fanfare. 500,000 human warships left conquered territories behind and traveled toward a lonely corner of the Orion Arm where no battle remained to be fought. Their destination was not a throne world, a victory parade, or a newly claimed frontier. It was the empty orbit of Epsilon Carini IV, the place where 23 million lives had disappeared into fire. As the fleet emerged from hyperspace, every bridge across every vessel fell quiet. Before them drifted the shattered remains of a world that had once symbolized humanity's hope. Broken sections of orbital stations floated endlessly through the darkness. Fragments of homes, schools, research laboratories, and gardens slowly rotated in the cold vacuum, illuminated only by the pale light of a distant sun. What had once been a thriving colony now resembled a cemetery stretching across millions of kilometers. Even space itself seemed reluctant to disturb the silence. Aboard the flagship Resolute Dawn, Admiral Elias Ward stood alone before the observation window. The stars reflected faintly in the glass, merging with the image of an aging commander who suddenly looked far older than the day the war had begun. Victory felt strangely weightless here. No military triumph could rebuild the lives erased in 7 terrible minutes. No surrender document could return parents to their children or children to their parents. Ward watched a tiny object drift past the flagship, a worn stuffed toy, frozen in space, turning slowly with no destination. Somewhere nearby floated shattered classroom walls, family photographs, wedding rings, unfinished paintings, and thousands of ordinary belongings that told stories no history book would ever fully preserve. These were not strategic losses. They were lives interrupted. Without a spoken command, the entire fleet acted as one. 500,000 engines powered down simultaneously. The deep hum that had accompanied humanity's armada across the stars faded into absolute stillness. Navigation lights dimmed. Weapon systems went offline. Across every bridge, every engine room, every medical bay, every fighter cockpit, millions of soldiers stood at attention. Veterans who had survived impossible battles lowered their heads. Young recruits who had never met the colony's inhabitants felt tears forming anyway. Civilian engineers, scientists, mechanics, and medics joined the silence alongside admirals and marines. For 1 full minute, the most powerful military force in galactic history became motionless. No speeches echoed through the fleet. None were necessary. Far beyond human space, millions of alien observers watched the ceremony through live transmissions. Entire civilizations that had once feared humanity expected celebrations filled with triumph and revenge. Instead, they witnessed grief. They saw a civilization powerful enough to conquer an empire choose remembrance over glory. Historians quietly recorded the moment. Philosophers debated its meaning. Former enemies found themselves questioning everything they believed about strength. Humanity had not fought to dominate the galaxy. It had fought because it refused to allow innocent lives to become meaningless statistics buried beneath political speeches. As the minute of silence ended, thousands of engineering vessels moved gently into the debris field. Not to harvest resources, but to recover memories. Every fragment was treated as sacred. Identification teams catalogued personal belongings. Memorial satellites were assembled from the remains of orbital stations. Architects began designing a new colony, not as a fortress, but as a promise. Its foundations would contain pieces of the original world so future generations would never forget the price that had been paid for peace. Children not yet born would someday walk beneath new skies, learning the names of those who had come before them. Before leaving the system, Admiral Ward transmitted one final message across every known frequency in the galaxy. We do not ask history to fear humanity. A pause followed. We ask history to remember why humanity chose to stand. Then the transmission ended. The fleet turned toward home, disappearing into hyperspace one brilliant wave at a time. Long after the last human warship vanished, the memorial satellites continued to orbit the empty world, their lights shining softly against the darkness like distant candles among the stars. From that day forward, every civilization understood a truth that would echo through history for thousands of years. Peace is not preserved by those who hope evil never comes. It is preserved by those who possess the strength to stop it, and the wisdom to know exactly when that strength must be used.